So I've got the first strip of my front cockpit sealing the mahogany planking like that. I've got my first one in, and the way that I did this is this is the floor piece that goes over there. And so I had that floor piece in, covered with plastic, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these strips basically parallel with this front flooring. And so I had the flooring piece in there so I can then set that down and get a frame of reference. Otherwise, there's just nothing to get started with. In my videos where I talked about doing it in the rear here, my reference was the support framing that supports the flooring. There's a little section of it on this side. And I was able to lay reference spacers on that, and then I made the flooring parallel with that. So getting the first piece started is the trick. So getting the bottom piece going, and then every other piece just, of course, goes from there. But on this side, or up here, I've only got this little section or front. I will end up putting a piece back here, but what I'm going to do is I've got this section in, and the next piece I will put in will be the one that goes above, and it'll go all the way back, and there's a notch cut out for that part of the gusset. But I need to get this, so that's my frame of reference now, and I'll make everything parallel to that. And so getting this right was just took a little thinking, and to get it, just had to figure out actually how I was going to do this. Took me a little bit to figure out how I wanted to, what lines I wanted to follow as far as be parallel with the flooring, be parallel with up here, or what. So we're trying to make it actually level, parallel with the stringers, but I decided to do parallel with flooring. So got the first one in, and I did the same technique that I did for the rear cockpit for those strips. And also it's a similar technique that I used for the planking out here on the hull, top sides. Except obviously in the cockpit, I've got 1/4 inch gaps in between the planks, whereas here, of course, there's no gaps. So one down. Now hopefully I can start going, get the next one done. So the next one will be a little tricky, because I'll make it parallel up here, but over here I've got to make sure that it continues on, and since there's a notch cut out, there's just a little bit of material, and you'll see the piece. Actually, I can show the piece. So I got to be careful about it flexing and bending the wrong way. There's the notch. So you can see there's not a lot of material there, so it could flex this way a little bit. So I'm going to use a piece. I'll get that piece started, and then I'm going to use the piece that goes above it to kind of hold, make sure it's a nice continuous line that goes, because these ceilings there's a nice compound curve. If you look on here, for example, you can see how they kind of go down and curve this way and down, and then they twist a little, and so there's nothing flat about them. So it's a little tricky, but I think I've got a technique to get it done. And the epoxy that I used to attach that plank piece, it's the same technique I used in the rear cockpit, and actually on the top sides too. What I do is I use the silver tip encapsulating epoxy, and the reason I do that again is because it's got a long working time, like 45 minutes. I use the slow hardener, but then I mix microspheres in it, and then also some mahogany powder, basically, that I made in my dust collector. I collected it out of that bag. It's a fine powder, with the microspheres is even finer. But I do a combination. This makes it brownish, but that's what does the bulk of the thickening. So I have it kind of thickened. It's not thick like mayonnaise. It's a little runny, but it's thicker. And actually doing colored epoxy, I don't know if I really need to do that, but I do. But because once you sand it, it actually kind of turns white. Plus, there's not a lot on the surface anyway. But that's what I do. And then I take a chip brush and I cut it off so the bristles are about 1 inch long, so they're a little stiff, and then I apply it to both surfaces, the ceiling panel and on the back side of that plank, and attach, and then use my pneumatic nail gun again right there with composite nails, and I do use dark brown ones. You can buy them. They're dark brown. I can show you that, I guess, real quick. Right here. Raptor nails, and they're dark brown. Because they will show slightly, but not really. But because the standard ones look like this, but I get the dark brown ones, and I did the same technique with my top sides, and you don't see them at all. And because of course the stain covers them up once you sand them off. I mean, it's just a little teeny little nub, and it just doesn't show at all. So it works really good. Just do it like this. So that's what I use. So now you can see I've got first 5 layers. Well, only half of this bottom layer. I got to do that over there. But I've got 5 layers done up here, at least over here. So it's going to take one more and then a partial one up there, and then I'll fill that in. So I'm going to peel off those little wooden 4mm plywood sort of washers, so to speak, is what I call them, and take the plastic off, and I'll show you what it's looking like so far. Got 2 layers peeled off here. I'll show how this works. Sometimes you can just kind of twist, because what I do is I usually put just one of those composite nails in each one. And usually what I try to do, kind of twist off sometimes, you can just get a little bit of edge under it and peel it, but twisting works better. But usually what I try to do is when I put the nail, I put it up towards the edge one way or the other. And, sometimes this one I can't quite get, and I've got a wedge like this with a real, just kind of get on the edge like that, peel it off, and then it leaves a little nub like that. Probably can't see that very well, but a little nub of the nail, and then I've got some wire cutters that I can cut that off. Some nice fine ones are actually for electronics, but they were good for that. Peel those off. These off like that. Some are tighter than others. And of course, this plastic keeps you from epoxying these to the wood, which I don't really get a lot. You can see a lot on here, but sometimes it spills over. And obviously don't want these epoxy to the wood. So you gotta have a lot of pieces of plastic. And the reason that I don't, I do these boards one at a time. Like I mentioned before, I do use that silver tip encapsulating epoxy, and then I thicken it. And again, the reason I do is because of the long working time. But it's tricky. It'd be hard to do one mix and do 2 of these, because by the time you get these all with the plastic nailed in and things, and then you got to do cleanup in between and up here to get the excess off, you kind of run out of time, even with a working time on the order of probably 45 minutes, but it'd be hard to do 2. So I just mix one batch and do one at a time. And the reason I cut little pieces of plastic like this that are wide enough to go over just one at a time, instead of using just one piece, just one, so I'm not fighting one big piece. But 2, you need to be able to get in between after you do one. You want to get in So if you're doing this one, if you had one big piece of plastic and you nail it in, now you can't get in here to put paper towel and clean up. So, and I do small pieces instead of one long strip just to make it a little more manageable as you're working through it. So, and then so I'll cut these little nubs off that show, and then what I will do is this whole panel will come out, and I'll clean these up like I did back there, and they'll look real nice. And then like I plan on doing back there too is I will bleach, just like I did the top sides. I will bleach these, stain and seal and do all that. So one thing with this, I was trying to make it parallel with this floor, so that's why I started with this piece. Well, when I had the floor pushed up to the edge, it actually raised up a little. So this board was supposed to be close to flush with the top edge of this. Well, it turns out it's like a 1/4 inch or so up, and it also isn't quite parallel. This side's up just a little bit. So what I'm going to probably try to do is, I've got this just held in place with just a few screws. I'll try to rock it down just a little. I've got enough margin to do just a little bit of that. But as far as this gap, it won't be a problem because I'm going to have carpet on this floorboard down here, and it's roughly 1/4 inch thick. So it won't, it'll be fine. It'll go right to this edge. So I'm not too worried about that. But as far as being higher, I wish it wouldn't have done it, but that's okay. So yeah, I'll keep working away at these and get this taken care of, and then I'll be working on getting the next piece and then the partial one that'll go up here. And then that one, I'd like to get that done today if I can. I did all 4 of these in one day yesterday. I was off work, so I was able to do it, but it just surprising how long it takes. Now I spent extra time to make sure, like gap, because when I put these on, I've got these little things that I made with basically a 1/4 inch spacer, and I put these in between the boards. Like I put one here, I tape them in place when I did this one, I had 4 of these I had held there, and so I could sit on, so I get that 1/4 inch gap. Actually, it's slightly less than a 1/4. Got a little bit of, but it's basically a 1/4 inch gap, like that. So I'll do the same, because what I do is just like this, I'll tape this up like this, put 4 of them on, and then I put the next piece in, then I know that I'm getting the gap that I want. So I'll continue on here. Got them all off. Plastic, and then these nubs, I've got these little wire cutters, which work real good to get up right up close, and then I just trim these little nubs off, and then they just have to be close, because when I'll sand this with my linear sander, it'll get them the rest of the way. But actually, twisting those washers works real good. So it got most of them. But got a few stragglers. And this is the same thing that I did with the top sides and the ceiling planking in the rear cockpit. And those 4mm plywood washers, you actually can reuse quite a few of them. You can see I got a little mark there. sometimes there's a little nub left or whatever, and it's good to, I just sand them off a little bit so they're smooth, because you don't want to put marks on the wood. So I'll be able to reuse a lot of those. I did make, when I just made a big batch of them, but I'll have plenty to do this. And then the other side I'll probably have to make some more, because you can reuse a lot of them, but some you can't. But so yeah, there we have it. And once this gets cleaned off, it'll look real good. And any little imperfections you can sand out. So I am making progress finally on getting these done. So I took the ceiling panel out on the port side of the front cockpit, and the reason I do that, because I got to attach these last two on the top and then this one on the bottom. It's just easier to work on instead of in the boat. And now that you can see how it's holding its shape nicely. So that's why I attach most of them in the boat in position. That way when this panel goes in, it's just compound curves, but it goes in nice to where it needs to be, and it's easier to attach. And so these two, what I need to do is I'm going to sand the back mating side with 40 grit sandpaper, and I just do it by hand, just scratch it up good for some extra mechanical adhesion, and then I'll attach them. And so this piece I will use the same little 4mm square washers, plywood washers, same way I did all of these. But this one, since it's on the edge, I'll be able to use clamps, and I'll just do clamps along here, and I'll do the same clamping for this bottom piece. It's just not having to deal with all those washers and stuff is nicer. I mean, I would clamp all this if I could, but there's no way to do that. So anyway, that's where I am. So this, after I get these attached, then this ceiling panel will be at least done. What I'll do is I'll cut this notch out for one of the frames there, and there's a notch up here. I'll cut that out of this after the glue sets. So, but yeah, and I'll use these same spacers to make sure these boards are positioned right when I put them in there. But yeah, this will be done, and then I'll sand that off like I mentioned before, and then I'll just wait for bleaching and staining and all that. Now on the back side, the composite nails actually poke through, so I will whack those off, and then I probably will run another coat of encapsulating epoxy on the back side. I'm pretty sure that's what I did on those. It's just good because when those poke through, I mean, they expose the wood, and I just like to have everything sealed up good, so I'll probably do one more coat in the back. But yeah, it's coming along. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and thought I'd show how I mix and thicken this epoxy and color it. And I've got everything's ready. I've got my cup marked. It's a 2-to-1 epoxy mix. I've got 1 ounce marked and the 1.5. Here's my chip brush that I cut off about 1 inch. That gives it's a nice stiff to spread that. So I'll put that over here. I'm ready. I'm gonna take this System 3 silver tip. And pour in 1 ounce. There's that. Hardener side. Slow hardener. Okay. Oops. Mix this up good. I've got you notice I've got a little fan, you can't see it. It's up here, just a little fan blowing air across here, because when I mix, especially the microspheres, it's a real fine dust that flies up, and it's not good stuff to breathe. I could use a respirator, but this is easier. Get that mixed, and it does, when you mix the silver tip, it does turn more of a clear color, which is nice. And this is mahogany, basically powder that I made in I dug out of my dust collector bag. That I've got my two-stage dust collection system, and the second stage is where all the fine stuff goes. And as you can see, this turns real, I mean, it's like dark chocolate cake batter color. And so I get that mixed up, and then these microspheres are real fine, powdery stuff, and I just slowly mix that in. Make sure I'm getting air blowing across this way so I'm not breathing it. You have to mix a little easier with this. The wood powder doesn't fly, it mixes in faster, it seems to, than these microspheres do. And get that mixed, and you can see it does lighten it up a little bit, but that's okay. And again, I don't know if I really need to darken this epoxy, but I do for the parts that will be stained. Now the thickness I'm looking for, this is like cake batter. I want a little bit thicker than that. What I should do, since I've been doing this quite a bit, the same amount, is just measure it. But I haven't done it, so I just kind of do what feels about right. And actually, the way I'm doing it now is I don't have to worry as much. I don't want it just to be real runny. But since it's on a horizontal surface now that I have that panel laying down horizontally, it's not as big a deal. When I was epoxying the other pieces in the boat, it was a vertical surface, and I had to worry a little bit about it being thick enough so it didn't run. Because what I do is I put epoxy on the ceiling panel first, or actually, ceiling panel first, and then I put it on the board I'm epoxying. And while I put it on the ceiling panel, I don't want it to drip down. So, but this is probably thick enough that'll work for me. Because if you get it too thick, then it's hard to spread. All right, I'm gonna see if I can move this over here now. Everything is set up, ready to go. I made sure my nailer had the whole thing of composite nails, and I gave it a couple hits to test it. Fine. Let's get rid of this. And it's good to kind of do rough marks about how far up you need to apply this on here, but you can eyeball it pretty good. Dip it in here. Oops. Get rid of these for now. The spacers in the way. But yeah, it is a lot easier doing this on a flat surface, I can tell you. I'm supposed to be doing this in the boat, leaning over the side of the boat. You can see how it's pretty thick, which is okay. And you want it, at least for me, I like it a little bit thick. It's actually works better as an adhesive epoxy, which is obviously what I'm using this for. You can see with a 1/4 inch space that I'm going up a little high there. I could probably not go up quite as high. Or as far that way. It's on there. Yeah, it kind of went way up there. I'll wipe that off. It's like spreading probably a cross between cake batter and frosting. That's why I cut the bristles off this brush. It's a little stiffer. If you try to do it without doing that, it would be hard to spread this. And there are different ways to spread it, of course. Works pretty well for me. All right. So that's ready, so now I'm gonna put it on here, side. What I do is kind of get in the middle and then work it out to the edges. And again, using this slow hardener is nice because you don't have to worry about it starting to set up on you. Because it does take, I mean, you can see how much time it's taking, but sometimes if you have to adjust something while you're in the middle, you don't have to worry about it setting up on you after 15 minutes or whatever. It depends on, of course, the temperature in your workspace too. This hardener's good for 45 minutes or something, so it's way plenty of time. So, don't have to worry about it. Now again, I don't use thickened silver tip for like structural stuff. Those of you who watched other videos of mine, you've heard me say this, but I use Gel Magic now. Again, I used to use the Glenelg epoxy grip, like I've said recently. Can't get that anymore. So structural stuff, again, I use the Gel Magic, and that's nice because it's real thick and no runs and that kind of thing. So it works real good. But like I've also said, it's a little bit expensive, but to me, basically, my philosophy is I don't skimp. I use bronze hardware, marine quality epoxies, the good stuff. And you spend a little extra on things. I use genuine mahogany lumber and spend a little bit extra, but I want this boat to outlive me. So, otherwise, I don't have my plastic ready. Forgot about that. This plastic strips here. So what I'm going to do is get one side going, and this one will go right to the edge. This side, actually I'm going to start on this side. Make it flush with these other ones. Lay this on here. Wash in place. Make sure that's snugged up against that spacer right there. Just give it a hit. Stuck on me a little bit there. I'll do that, and then what I'll do is I'll come here in the middle. Get one up. Now this board is warped just a little. Sometimes you gotta coax it a little bit. My compressor is probably going to go off here in a little bit. My hose here hissing just a little. So make sure it gets go. And then this piece right here is held nicely. So I don't need to do any extra encouragement on this one. It's already snug up against the spacer. So once that's in place, I can just pull these spacers out. One, to kind of get them out of the way, but two, so I don't forget. And epoxy spacers place. That would be not great. Come in here. You can see me pushing pretty hard, and that's why I use spacers, otherwise it would mark these boards all up real bad. So you don't want that. It's in place. Kind of space these just up and down, and what I try to do is I kind of see how it's, sometimes you can see the edge where it's not squirting out. If it's not, usually we'll go in there and put a spacer, but, or not a spacer, washer, but doing it flat like this, and this isn't as curved here, whereas back there, down there was curved more, so it was a little tougher to get it to push all the way down, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Oops. But I like to make sure that I'm seeing good squeeze out. That way you know it's spreading that epoxy well. Go. Every so often it misfires on me. Oh, like right there. When I was doing it in the boat, it was obvious because the washer would just fall down. These are all good. There. So you got to remember when you're doing this that they are firing through and sticking through. These are actually a little long, they're longer. I mean, the thickness of these two is roughly 1/2 inch, and I forget the length of these. That might be I think it's 3/4. So it's breaking, coming out the back. So in a case like this, it's probably hitting this cardboard, which is no problem. But you just got to be careful like that, or just be aware of it. Like in the boat, it was actually like my frame pieces that this thing gets screwed to. I didn't pay attention to where they were, so it was kind of poking in there a little bit, which wasn't a big deal, but something I had to just break it free from. So there we go. Oh, see there? This one did not go. Here, just for good measure. So, there it is. So now what I gotta do is I'll clean this up. There's a decent amount of squeeze out, which is good. I mean, I put more epoxy on there than you actually need. But like I've said many times with epoxy, you do not want to skimp as far as how much. Now you gotta be careful about squeeze out. You don't want to squeeze out too much. Let me get rid of this. But you want good coverage. Too much is better than not enough. Now again, this isn't structural, especially for structural stuff. When you're epoxying battens and frames and all that stuff, you definitely do not want to skimp. You don't want to overclean all that stuff. So I'll clean this up a little more, and I'll get in here. And one thing too, I don't overlap the spacers, so then I can peel the plastic back and get in there and clean that up. So, all right, well, I will keep doing this, get that finished, cleaned up, and start working on the next piece. Okay, I got the final 2 pieces attached, And like I mentioned, I went ahead and just used clamps instead of those wooden washers. And actually 1.5 ounces of thickened epoxy, I was able to do both of these. So let that cure overnight, and tomorrow, assuming I do this, next piece or next part tomorrow, I'll sand that off and get it cleaned up and clean up the edges here and make sure these are, because some of these boards stick out further than they need to be, and I'll get that cleaned up. And trim that notch I mentioned there, and on the side over here, I'll get those cut out and stuff. So yeah, it's getting closer to being done, so I'm glad about that. So we'll just keep marching forward.